Thanks for being here this morning. I've got a few things that I just want to share with you. I'm excited to get into it. So this series is a little bit different. Normally I come out and I like to tell jokes and make fun of myself, but I really don't think that fits this series, so I'm going to do it a little bit different. I want to just tell a couple stories of people who volunteer here at Element. One of them is this. In 2013, a freshman in high school got into an argument with his mom, like they always did, full of yelling, cussing, and screaming at one another. But it went to a whole new level this time, with a chair and a table getting broken. And see, the boy found himself fearing and fighting the very person that he expected to protect him. The boy found himself later sitting outside of his house in the back of an ambulance, getting patched up by a young man just a few years older than him, and being helped by a person he felt like he could finally look up to. The boy began following the paramedic to parties and places that put him in situations that he should have never been. The boy found himself defending the paramedic to the people around him, painting him to be a better character than the paramedic actually was or even ever tried to be. And when the boy mustered up enough courage to address the issues and set a healthy boundary, saying, "I can't keep following you, it's just too one-sided," the paramedic dismissed his comments, belittled him, and said, "You'll follow me regardless of how I treat you." See, the boy was wounded, not just by his mother and the broken table. He's wounded by his father checking out way too early and the new role model that didn't model anything worth following at all. His wounds go much deeper than stitches can heal. His ability to trust is wounded. And then there's the story of the woman who's in her 20s, who spends her waking moments trying to build her career, choosing to live at home in an effort to save some money. And in the midst of building her career, the woman comes home exhausted one day. She crashes on the couch. She begins to pet the family dog, and for whatever reason, the dog reacts out of anger instead of love, with a bite to her face, just missing her eye by fractions of an inch. She's wounded, but little did she know that the wounds that could be stitched back together would be the least of her wounds from that event, because later that week, her mother, when challenged to get the dog some training or to possibly put the dog down if it didn't respond to the training, just shifted blame and said the woman shouldn't have petted the dog that way. She probably brought it on herself. See, her face is cut, but her heart was wounded, and her family is wounded. Or maybe your story could be like the man who grew up in the shadow of his older sister, watching her get everything she wanted or desired. And when he would ask for something simple like a shirt or a pair of jeans, he was told that boys don't need those things and that he'd be fine. And in jealousy, frustration, and let's be honest, just immaturity as a young boy, he would begin to lash out at his sister, destroying the things that she loved and held on to, and beginning to hit her every now and then. In response to him hitting his sister, his father would hit him and just take swings at his stomach one after another and yell at him. And his mother would respond not in his defense to say, "Don't hit our child." She would respond in a way that said, "Don't hit him in the stomach, that's why God made butts." Fast forward into decades of adulthood, and we find a man depriving himself of things like heat in the house or a new pair of shoes, not because he lacks the income or the financial stability to afford them, but because much more than his stomach was wounded so many years ago, his self-worth was wounded. And then there's the guy whose father told him it was never okay to slow down, because the moment you slow down or take a break is the moment the man catches up. And so he worked his butt off to get good grades, get into college, acquire multiple degrees, and start his career running over any and every obstacle that stood in his way. Not only in his career, but nearly in every area of his life. The man worked hard, committing, and then doing what most of us do in that position, overcommitting himself to everything that came his way. Completely exhausted, the man began to look around and ask the question, is anything I'm doing worth anything at all? Not only was he burned out and his energy was completely depleted, but his sense of identity was wounded. How about you? See, this series is heavy. It's different. But what wounds do you walk in this morning? Because I think I could give you the mic, and you could come up here and you could tell your story and you could express your pain, and we would do exactly what the Apostle Paul commands us to do. We would hurt with those who hurt, and we would weep with those who weep, and we would feel your pain because your pain is real. See, I could share my story and you could feel it and I would feel justified. But here's the thing. I don't share the stories of our volunteers so that you get on their side. I share their stories to be real about the fact that we're all wounded. This isn't about who's wrong and right, because listen, I've explored that option. I've been wronged and I've run that path and I've tried to justify how right I was in the decision I made, and I could make an excellent case. And the point is, at the end of it, I'm still just as wounded. I might be justified, but I'm still hurting. And so this morning isn't about who's wrong and who's right. This morning is about how do we find healing. See, in the 5 weeks of this series, you might laugh and you might cry some, and that's okay. But my hope is that you would find healing. Not just healing that's on the surface, but healing goes much deeper than stitches can heal. My hope as your pastor is that you'd experience healing for your soul, because when I look at the life and the ministry of Jesus, here's what I find. I see people laugh, and I see some people cry, but so much more, I see people experience healing. And when I look at his life, I watch him extend an invitation to those around him. And I believe the invitation gets extended to us into something so much greater. Away from like bitterness and frustration and unforgiveness, he invited them, and I believe he invites us to something so much more. So I want to invite you to explore what that could be over the next 4 weeks. I want to invite you to experience truth and grace so that you can remember what it is to have hope and have joy. But for us to understand our wounds, I think we need to go back to the root of the problem. See, in the beginning, there's this book called Genesis. It's like the beginning of the Bible. If you have a Bible, you can open up to Genesis 3, and I'm going to talk for a few minutes and give you a chance to find it. If you don't have a Bible, no stress. The real Bible we'd suggest you using is the Bible app on your phone, because we always have our phones with us. And it's a really convenient way to get the Bible. And then just change it out of King James Version, because unless you read a lot of Shakespeare and you love that, you're probably not going to understand most of what it says. As a pastor, it's funny, I have conversations with people a lot, and one guy came to me, he said, hey, I had to go get another Bible because I just didn't understand at all what I was reading. And I'm like, it's cool, man. King James, I don't understand it either. So let's find something else. But in any case, Genesis chapter 3, Genesis is a word, just means beginning. It's the beginning of the Bible. If you have a hard copy Bible, it's probably like page 2 is where we're going to be right now. All right, but Genesis 1 and 2 gives us an account of creation. It's like the beginning of everything in all of time. And then you have kind of man and woman interacting in this garden that God creates. And we see them interacting and having a relationship, and we kind of see some dynamics of that. And then it fast forwards, and I want to be real clear about something. I have no idea the amount of time in between Genesis 2 and Genesis 3. I think a lot of times, in Christian circles, people assume that God creates the earth in 7 days, and then on day 8, what we're about to read happens. I don't believe that at all. It could be hundreds, thousands, millions of years that go by without what happens happening. But in any case, the Bible fast forwards, and we get Genesis chapter 3. And it takes us back to the root of the problem for all of humanity. It starts this way. It says, the serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild animals. Now, I just want to tell you, the serpent's about to talk. I don't know how that happens. I'm not sure what God's doing here, but it is what goes on. Don't get distracted by that, though. The serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild animals the Lord God had made. And one day he asked the woman, did God really say that you must not eat of the fruit from any of the trees in the garden? And she says, of course, we can eat from the fruit of the trees in the garden. It's only the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden that we're not allowed to eat. God said you must not eat it or even touch it, and if you do, then you'll die. And the serpent says, no, come on, please, you won't die. In fact, God knows that your eyes will be open, and as soon as you eat it, you're going to be like God, knowing both good and evil. And the woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted the wisdom that it would give her, so she took some of the fruit and ate it. And I wish the verse stopped right here, because as a man, I can blame women for a lot. Right? If we just stopped right here, it'd be awesome. It would be like, Eve, you're so stupid. Women ruined all of humanity. They made the decision and they compromised something, and it's all on them. But the problem is it doesn't stop there. The verse keeps going and says, then she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it too. See, the problem for the man is that he was just passive. It wasn't that he wasn't there. And in this moment, they make a decision that they expect to be pretty minimal. It's just some fruit. I don't think it's an apple. We always seem to blame the apple. Apples are too good. Blame something else. It's probably a grapefruit, because that's a gross fruit. In any case, they take a bite of a piece of fruit, and they don't expect much to change at all. But what they expected to be minimal turns out to be monumental. Have you ever been there? Like you make a decision that you expect to have minimal results or minimal change in your life, and it turns out to be monumentally different. See, one of our guys this week in listening to this message told me the story of Scrat the saber-toothed squirrel from Ice Age that wants to just bury his acorn. He's a squirrel who has an acorn, and he doesn't want anybody else to take it. He wants to protect it. And so he runs out, and he finds this place to bury his acorn, and he sticks it in the ground, and he jumps on it a little bit and begins to pile some snow on it. And immediately, while he's in the middle of jumping, all of a sudden the ice begins to crack. And it's one little crack, and he's like, oh, this isn't good. And then another one goes out this way, and then one goes out that way, and immediately he begins to see that one decision to hide one acorn that shouldn't have changed anything has splintered everything. Have you ever been there? I don't mean you're a saber-toothed squirrel trying to hide your acorn. That's for the movies, but I mean, have you ever been in a place where you made a decision that you just didn't expect to change that much, and it changed everything? Maybe it was a good decision. Right? We're talking about woundedness, we're talking about heavy stuff, but let's talk about some good stuff. Maybe it was a decision to shift jobs. And you thought, I'm going to be doing the same thing just for a different company, or I'm going to move departments and I'm going to be doing the same thing for a different person. But what happened when you got over there is that somebody actually noticed how hard you worked. And you found yourself standing and talking to one of the VPs, and now you find yourself as one of the VPs, and you go, my life is completely different because I made a decision to just shift one thing, and I didn't think it would change that much, but it seemed to change everything. Maybe it was the decision in high school or college to go to the party, and you went, it's not that big of a deal. Everybody does it. Everybody's gone down that road, but now you find yourself 5, 10, 15, 20 years later still trying to recover from the thing that you gave away at the party you shouldn't have been at. Or maybe you're the addict that says, I just thought it would be one more drink or one more hit. And it's turned into a lifetime battle with sobriety, where you sit and you go, it wasn't supposed to be like this. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was just one more drink. How did it lead me to here? Maybe you're like me and you've been in relationships where you've experienced a series of decisions that just seem minimal that led to a breakup or the divorce. And you went, well, I just wanted to catch up with an old friend on Facebook. I had no idea it would tear everything down. So we're going to take a look at a decision that they thought would be minimal that turns out to be monumental. And we're just going to focus on 3 things that change when man defines good and evil for themselves. Now, that's the whole thing that we need to understand this morning. Up until this point, for Adam and for Eve, God had defined good and evil. All of creation was underneath what God said was right and what God said was wrong. And things were good. There was no problems. There was no issues. But in this moment, Adam and Eve say, listen, we know what God said, but we think we know what's best. And when they made that decision, things begin to shift. And I'm convinced that the same is true for us. Because isn't that the way that we all make the decisions that we make? I can know what's right and wrong. My parents said it. I can know what's right and wrong. I've read my Bible. I can choose to trust God, or I can choose to do my own thing. And so many times, at least for me, so many of the regrets and the shame that I carry come from the moments where I said, I know what God says, but I think I know what's best. And then I do exactly what Adam and Eve did. It's not that big of a deal. It's just one small decision that turns out to be a much bigger deal. But 3 things change when man thinks they know better than God. The first one is this: truth is distorted and trust is broken. Truth is distorted and trust is broken. Take a look at how the serpent does it. In Genesis 3, 4, and 5, he says, you won't die. That's just a diminishment of truth. God had told them, if you eat of that fruit, you're going to die. Not immediately, you're going to have a heart attack and fall over. It's not poison. But that your body is going to begin to deteriorate and death will be ahead of you. You weren't destined for that, but now you will be. You won't die, is what the serpent said. Just don't, no. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that much of a problem. Just take one bite. How could that really hurt? In fact, and then he does the flip side of diminishing truth, he exaggerates truth. You're going to be like God. Think of how awesome that'll be. Like if you eat this, not only are you not going to die, in fact, you're going to be so much better. And I'm like, man, you're just telling my story. No, it was just one more drink. It's not that big of a deal. And in fact, when I go to the party, I have such a good time. Why is it that when we go to parties, and I'm just trying to pick on partiers for a minute, but why is it when we go to parties, we always forget about the hangover the morning after? And you go, well, I don't necessarily have a hangover. Like, I've gotten used to my alcohol. Great, but like, do you not have regrets the morning after? We never tell that story. We do exactly what the serpent does to the woman. No, it's not that big of a deal. I know I have a test tomorrow, and I know I have a thing coming up, and I know I got something that I'm working on, and I know I got responsibilities at work, and I know my family needs me at home, and I know this and I know that, but it's not that big of a deal. I'm just going out with the friends. And it's going to be awesome. Happy hour is amazing. And one minimal decision turns out to be a monumental shift in our lives. But this is how it happens. We either diminish or exaggerate truth. And the result of that is always sin, and it robs us of being able to trust one another. Because think about this. What if, I'm going to ask you to imagine something that's going to be pretty impossible. What if no one in society lied? That's crazy. I mean, like, some of you are like laughing at me, like that's just stupid. I can't even think about that. Like, what if there was no fake news? Like, what if you could like look at Facebook and actually trust what you read? See, my problem is I don't trust any news source now. Because of like the amount of fake news out there and the amount of like bias and politicking that goes on, like I don't trust anything that I read. But what if like that wasn't the case? What if people actually were just honest all the time? And so like the president said what was actually true. Or like when she said, guys, it's all okay, you could actually trust that everything was okay. Or when he said, I'm just going out with the guys, you could know he's just going out with the guys. Or parents of teenagers, when she said, I'm just going to hang over at my friends and watch a movie, you would know that that doesn't actually mean we're going out to a party. And you could like trust one another. How much different would that be if trust wasn't broken? Like I could watch an ad for sunglasses. You guys have seen the ad for HD sunglasses? It's like my favorite advertisement on TV. I make fun of it every time it comes on. Like I pause it, wait for Kim to like come out of whatever she's doing, like make sure we watch this together. And she's like, I don't want to watch the commercial again. But there's so many things in the commercial that bother me. First of all, the person putting on the glasses, like the camera angle before this person puts on these sunglasses, that person is near death. Like I think like the curtains are closing in with them. They are blinded. Like the lights that are out there are so unbelievably blurry, there's no way they're going to be able to see. And then they put on these glasses and it's like magical. And then they have this stupid smile on their face where they're like, and they kind of like do this thing. I'm like, it's just creepy and weird. And they're like, you buy these glasses for $9.99, we're going to give you a free pair and a flashlight that never breaks. And I'm like, that's awesome. And if it actually did what you advertised, my whole life would be different. But reality is, I can't trust that commercial. I don't trust most of what I see on TV. How could I? It's too easy to compromise truth. It's too easy to diminish what we don't want people to know about and exaggerate what we do want people to know about. How in the world could I possibly trust? And see, that's the position that we all find ourselves in because of truth being distorted. The moment we decide to distort truth, trust is broken. And then because trust is broken, our ability to experience intimacy is damaged. And I don't mean just like intimacy like in a marriage and like being able to have sex. Like you can still do that, right? But I mean intimacy, like the ability to like have a relationship and vulnerability and openness, the ability to lean on one another when you're hurting, the ability to like be close, whether it be with a friend or a spouse or a child. our ability to experience intimacy is damaged because our trust has been broken. See, before they eat the fruit, they had innocence. And I don't mean like they were innocent, like naive. I mean like they just had innocence. Like there was nothing that was in between them. There was nothing that had gone wrong. There was nothing that was a problem. And their innocence led them to intimacy, but now their sin is leading them to shame and destroying the closeness that they were able to have one day. And I started trying to think of like, what does innocence look like? What is like a picture of that? And the picture I come up with is this. It's a picture of my son. We took a cruise last month, and this is him on our balcony, relaxing in a lounge chair, eating a bottle, and I don't know how well you can see it because I got a light in my face, but all he's wearing is a diaper. And see, in this moment, Kim and I were in our room stressed. And you go, how are you stressed on a cruise? Look, we thought that the cruise ship was going to have like a splash park and a kiddie pool because we had been on Royal Caribbean before, and the ships we had been on had that, and this one didn't. And it was just like frustrating because like half of the trip we expected to be able to take him to like a pool or drop him off with my mom at the pool so we could go have our own time. And she put him in the pool for like 10 seconds, and a lifeguard walks over and goes, nope, he's still in a diaper. He's not allowed in there. And I'm like, can we lie and tell him that he doesn't need diapers anymore? And they were like, no. He's 8 months old. It's pretty clear that he needs a diaper. See, I was willing to compromise truth to get a better experience. That's how we get here. But in any case, while Kim and I are stressed out, Noah's just enjoying life. He's like, bottle, good. Lounge chair, looking at the ocean, good. No pants, good. He's like, this is what I want. I don't care about a pool. This is perfect. There's innocence. And it changes his experience. But that's not what they had. See, what they had is what we see the verse right after they ate the fruit. It says at that moment when they ate it, their eyes were open. Suddenly they felt shame at their nakedness. So they did what they could do. They sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. It's like they eat of the fruit and they're like trying to distinguish the taste, and all of a sudden they notice that they're not wearing anything. And I think in that moment, just like I think in our moments, it's like, oh crap. Wasn't supposed to be this way. It wasn't supposed to change everything. Eating a piece of fruit wasn't supposed to change how I see somebody or how I see myself. Going to that party wasn't supposed to change the way that I feel about who I am or feel about who they are. Wasn't supposed to make that big of a difference. But immediately, they feel shame. And so they sew some fig leaves together to cover themselves. And they make their best attempt at covering up their shame. And you go, so what do we do? Well, I don't know, really, because everything's already changed. Like, this moment didn't just change their lives, it seems to have changed ours as well. Truth is distorted and trust is broken. Because trust is broken, their ability to experience intimacy with one another is changed, and then our relationship with God is wounded. See, because the very next verse, we see when the cool evening breezes were blowing, the man and his wife heard the Lord God walking about in the garden. And if we just stop right there, what they would have normally done is walked and talked with God. Like in Genesis 2, we see that. We see that they interact with the creator of the universe. That they have a relationship with him, that they can experience intimacy not only with one another, but with God. That there's not only nothing this direction, but there's nothing this direction that becomes a barrier. But now what they do is they find themselves hearing God in the garden, and instead of being excited, instead of being joyful, they find themselves fearful. And they hide from the Lord among the trees. And the Lord calls to the man, where are you? Where are you? And if you go read it, and I challenge you to read Genesis 3 this week because we're not going to read the rest of it, what you're going to see is that they come out and they go, God, we were afraid because we were naked. And God says, who told you you were naked? Because up until that point, they had no idea. And then God says, what happened? And immediately the man does exactly what the serpent did. He diminishes truth and he exaggerates truth. He says, God, it was the woman you gave me. Instead of accepting his own responsibility, he diminishes his responsibility and he exaggerates God. God, wouldn't be a problem if you hadn't created her. Boom, take that. So God turns to the woman and he goes, what happened? She goes, God, it was the serpent you created. She diminishes her own responsibility and exaggerates the responsibility of somebody else. They're like two teenagers or two adults because we do the same thing all the time. No. I didn't mean for this to happen. Well, intentions don't matter because where you're at is where you're at. And then God doesn't even turn to the serpent and ask the question. He just begins to punish the serpent. And yet Adam and Eve get some punishment in that, and you can read it in Genesis 3 because there is always consequence to the decisions we make. Whether good or bad, there's always consequence to deal with. But ultimately what we see in Genesis 3:21 is this, is that God, they're going to put it up there on the screen for me. The Lord God made clothing from animal skins for Adam and his wife. See, he said, you guys have attempted to cover your shame, and it's not sufficient. Let me take care of it for you. And there's a sacrifice that's made, and their shame is actually not just covered, but removed. But it only happened when they decided to come out of hiding. And here's what I want you to know this morning. For healing to happen, we have to come out of hiding. I don't know what your wound is. Hopefully you've been thinking of it this morning. Hopefully you have like a better idea of what it is. I think you're probably in touch with it. For there's some of you in here who go, I'm not wounded. That's awesome. Invite your friends who are. Right? Bring them because they need this series. But for healing to happen, we have to come out of hiding. For healing to happen for Adam and Eve, they had to come out of hiding. And they were afraid, if I come out of hiding, then he's going to get me. But what they found is that God wasn't trying to rob them of joy. He was trying to give them joy. He was trying to take away their shame so that they could experience something so much greater. So as we get ready to close, the band's about to come back up here. I want to just wrap up with this. As the story closes, we see God wandering through the garden, searching for his people. So if you walked in this morning searching for God, I want you to know that you're involved in a mutual search because he's looking for you too. Not to get you back or to make you pay. He's searching for you to help you heal, to bandage your wounds and remove the shame that the sin has caused. He's able to bring true help so that you can be healed in your soul. Now, I want to hit the pause button before I end this message. There's some people in here who are looking at me like the problem you're not addressing is that my wounds aren't caused by me. My wounds are caused by what somebody else did. And you're right. And that's not your fault. And I don't want to put that on your plate. But the problem is this isn't about who's wrong or right. It's about the wounds that we carry. So I'm not trying to dismiss the fact that maybe you made all the right decisions and somebody else made some of the wrong decisions. But the point is, we're wounded and we need to experience healing. And somebody somewhere, whether it was you or someone else along the way, decided that they knew better than what God knew. And they made their decision and maybe they cut you instead of cutting themselves. But the question we have to answer this morning is not who's wrong or right. It's not how hard can we try. It's this. Will you continue to hide? Or will you ask for healing? And so I want to challenge you to do one thing as this message closes. You have like a connection card there on your your clipboard in front of you. It's a chance for like you to fill it out, let us know a little bit more about you. You can feel free to write what I'm about to ask you to write on that card, but I'm not even challenging you to do that. I want to challenge you to pull out your phone and make a note in your phone that only you can see. Because I don't need you to expose your wound to me so that you can experience healing. I just want you to put it on the table so that between you and God, you both know clearly what it is. And so I want to challenge you to take out your phone and just answer this question. My wound is blank. And for some of you, there needs to be an S on there. My wounds are blank. God, you promise in your word that if we come out of hiding, that you can provide healing. So I'm going to pray this morning for everyone in here. Maybe they're trying to muster up the boldness to write down a note in their phone that says, I'm wounded much deeper than I've ever wanted to admit. But God, I pray that if we would take a step of faith, if we would take the risk, if we would begin to move, just by writing something down that says, my wound is this, that you would be faithful to what you promised and that you would begin to provide healing because, God, I'm convinced that I'm not the only one in the room who's carrying around woundedness and pain that's affecting everything in my life. God, I pray that you would help us find healing that's deeper than just what a bandage can cover, but is something that cures our soul. God, be faithful to what you promised. It's in your name I pray. Amen.